Today on The Family Answer Man, we are answering your questions about the difference between sadness and depression from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orgis, and I am joined here by Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man himself. This is a time that's designed to answer your questions, commonly asked both in the counseling and church settings, and our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, and happier family. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas, and Days Smokehouse is located at 35770 LA Highway 16, just north of Denham Springs. This show is not a therapy session, and this is not specific advice to your situation. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be and often are very complicated and dynamic. For in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. But we hope that this episode of The Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and a happier family. Again, I am David Orgis, and I am joined by Dr. Mark Crosby, our Family Answer Man, the expert himself. He has his PhD in psychology. He is a licensed professional counselor and is licensed to supervise professional counselors, and he's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. So, Dr. Mark, you have been a therapist for a long time, and you've also been in ministry for a long time. So, I'm sure you have gotten this question a lot, especially as the awareness of depression and then the cultural use of the word depression has become pretty popular, of what's the difference of sadness and depression and kind of that topic. And is there a big distinction between the two?
Well, first of all, sadness and depression, I will argue, basically have similar, if not the same symptoms. But with that being said, there is a difference. And the difference is not so much the symptoms, the difference is the time frame. In other words, if a person, got laid off, on Monday, they're going to be sad. They lost their job, whatever. If a person, got some bad news concerning maybe their 401k or whatever.
That's a lot of people right now.
That's right. They'll be sad for a little while. But it's when it goes beyond 2 weeks and you have a series of symptoms of sadness, of feeling worthless, of feeling down, of losing interest in, some of the pleasurable activities you used to enjoy. When it goes beyond 2 weeks and you have a plethora of these symptoms, and we'll talk about those more in a moment, that is when sadness becomes depression. So again, sadness is something anybody can experience. If you didn't do well on a test, if you didn't do well, for the pastors who are listening, you felt like, hey, that sermon just, fell flat or whatever. You may go home and you may feel a little sad about it, but the reality is, come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're bouncing back, you're getting ready for that sermon, getting ready to preach, you're getting ready to, take that test again, whatever situation you may be in, and you go on. But depression is a matter of time. In other words, if I do something or say something or experience something and it causes sadness in my life, and that sadness continues on, and other symptoms are added to it, and it goes beyond 2 weeks. And the criteria, as we'll talk about in a few moments, if you meet 5 of the 9 symptoms, then you could be considered depressed. And the official diagnosis would be, in that case, major depressive disorder.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that depression is longevity in there. Right. It's the time frame, but also that sadness is a basic human emotion that,
exactly.
And in certain circumstances, if you didn't feel sadness,
exactly,
that would be a surprise and maybe unhealthy.
Exactly. I mean, sadness is part of life. It's the emotions that we have. I mean, happiness, sadness, gladness. I mean, these are all things we experience, throughout the day, throughout our life. But it's when it goes beyond 2 weeks and you're adding other symptoms to it that it goes from sadness, if you will, into a level of depression.
Well, I think that's a great baseline for our question that we're about to jump into today on The Family Answer Man. Little distinction between sadness and depression there kind of, I think, sets the table for this question really well. The question that was written in says, my wife has everything. A nice home, a nice car, great kids. I'm assuming he probably thinks an amazing husband as well. It says we go on vacations, we have friends, but she always seems sad. She says it's depression. Yeah. So what is the difference?
Again, depression, first of all, is a time frame where sadness and other symptoms, again, create this depressed mood or this depressive disorder. So the reality is that, and this is something that maybe our audience may not be fully aware of, but depression is more complex than most realize. And the reason why I say that is because I'll just take a personal family example. My mother and father, they were hardworking people, good people, went to church, all those things. And they just felt anyone who was depressed, it was kind of the old saying, it's all in their head kind of thing. It's not a major deal. Just kind of snap out of it, get better,
You have a lack of faith.
A lack of faith, whatever, exactly. And so what happened is that they just thought anyone who was depressed just couldn't handle problems and just couldn't handle life and hey, kind of suck it up, buttercup, and move on. Until they got depressed. And then they realized that depression is a real thing, that depression really is debilitating. The depression is just consuming of the soul, of the mind, of the heart, of the spirit, and the list could go on. And so they begin to realize that depression is more than just something that's in your head, more than just, hey, snap out of it, but it is a real complex disorder that, again, one must deal with. So again, there's many causes to depression that you have to look at. Here are some lifestyle or what I would call reactive causes. Sometimes when people have financial problems, that can be a trigger or cause for depression. When a person is not making the money they thought they could be making, or they lose money, or they maybe lose money in the stock market, or they lose a job, or they can't pay all their bills. Financial problems can be a cause of depression. Death of a loved one or friend can be a cause of depression. Family problems, when your kids are not, doing what you would hope they would be doing, when they are not achieving what you'd hope they'd be achieving, when, your marriage is not everything you'd hoped it was going to be at this stage of life. When there's family problems, there is a sense of depression that comes out of that. Legal problems, stress, retirement can be a cause of depression because you think, well, hey, I'm retiring, everything should be good now, I don't have to go back to work. But for a lot of men and women, you lose your identity.
I've heard that a lot, and I'm not near retirement, but I hope to be one day. And but in that, I in my mind, especially as a kid growing up, it's like, oh, you retire, you travel, you go do all these amazing things.
Free.
It's the best time of your life. But I hear that a lot more now is that people that have retired really struggle with that sometimes.
Well, they struggle because they've lost their identity. They've lost their sense of self-worth. They have lost their sense of power and authority. If they were the CEO, if they were the president, if they were the primary financial manager or whatever it may be, and they walk away from that, then the question is, so what do I have control over? Where is my authority? Where is my purpose? What is my identity? No one calls me like they used to. People don't search out my counsel like they used to. I don't get phone calls to support, someone's particular agenda or position or vote, maybe in the company, like I used to. And so there's a sense of, who am I? What's my purpose? And do I have any real sense of worth any longer? Because for a lot of men and some women, their worth is found in their job.
Right.
And so when that job is gone, in many cases, they feel like their worth is gone. So my point is, if you do not plan for retirement, not only financially, but also in other activities of life, not just I'm going to fish every day or golf every day, but something that creates inside of you a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of accomplishment. If you don't prepare for that, then depression can and will find its way in your life.
So identity and worth are more than just enjoying life. It's what do we give back and add value into the rest of the world around us.
Exactly. I mean, we were created, I will argue, to achieve and to accomplish. And, when God would make something, he would pause and would say, that was good.
Right.
And he would make something, he said, that was good. There's something inside of us that says we want to look back over our day or our week and say, you know what, I did that and I did that and I accomplished that and that was good. When we don't do that, and here's the point, depression can find its way into our life. Health changes can create depression. Substance abuse can create depression. Recent changes in our living conditions, as we just were kind of talking about with retirement. Inactivity and boredom. One of the greatest things you can do to fight back sadness and depression is in some way, some level, stay active to the best of your ability.
Right.
You know,
Just getting up and moving.
just, if and I want to say to the best of your ability, you may not be a person who runs, 5Ks, okay, but you can get out and walk, hopefully. You can maybe ride a bicycle. You can walk on a treadmill. You can maybe play a little basketball with your grandkids or your children or whatever, on the weekends or whatever it may be. But the reality is getting out and moving and exercising and walking the dog, riding a bicycle, and especially if you can do it when the sun's still out, before nightfall, because sunshine and exercise has been proven, for decades to be a great way to deal with the depression in your life. So inactivity and boredom can be a cause for depression. There's also what is called some psychogenic factors. And that just is
Explain, psychogenic. What's
fancy word for saying beliefs.
Okay.
And beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about others, beliefs about, certain situations and circumstances. But again, when people have the belief that I'm afraid people won't like me, and that belief finds its way into their psyche, that can be a cause of depression. Or people say, I'm worried that I'm not good enough. Or in the Christian realm, and pastors, again, be mindful of this, when a person feels, I worry I've done something unforgivable.
Ooh.
I worry I've done something unforgivable. I have said something. I have done something. I have thought something. I have gotten involved in something that I feel is unforgivable. When that reality, or that belief, I should say, becomes a reality in that person's mind, that can be a source of depression. For others, I feel I have no control over my life. They feel like everyone else has control of my life. My boss, my spouse, my kids, my friends, my schedule. And when they say, I feel like I have no control over my life, someone always has something else for me to do, I have no control over my life, that creates a sense of depression. Another belief is when a person thinks that very few people love them. Why am I not getting phone calls from my kids? Why am I not getting, text messages from my spouse? Why am I not being invited to, the party or to the fellowship or to the event? And that sense of, I feel that few people love me, if that belief becomes a reality in their mind, then that can be a source of depression. Others, will say things like, when I compare myself to others, I don't measure up. And we see that on Facebook.
Right. That's the whole conundrum of social media, right?
Right.
You get to evaluate everybody by their perfect image that they curated, and then yourself by the, closed couch in the living room, because you live in reality and don't see theirs.
Yeah, well, you see the pictures, they went to Mexico, or they went to Canada, or they went to Europe, or they, had, lunch in Paris, and, they put all the Facebook posts up, they went on this, amazing cruise to wherever. And they put all these things up, and there you are going, well, golly gee, I just watched, The Price is Right over and over again, and golly gee, I guess my life is never going to measure up.
I ate at the gas station today, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got sushi at the gas station, and they're having, brunch, in front of the Eiffel Tower. And so what happens is that if I feel like I don't measure up, if I feel like others' lives are so much better than mine, then that creates this sense of depression. Another thing that, again, when a person believes that they can't say no, and I hear that a lot, people say to me, I just can't say no, I just can't say no, I just can't say no. Well, yes, you can. You just choose not to.
Unpack that a little bit for us. That's a big...
Well, again, we've gone down this road before, but the reality is that people who have what I would call this codependent mindset, this need to be needed, this need to be liked, this need to be approved, or the approval of other people, I should say, they feel like I have to say yes all the time. And what happens is when they want to say no, or they need to say no and they don't, and they say yes, and they really wanted to say no, I didn't want to go to that event, I didn't want to sign up for that, I didn't want to volunteer for that, I didn't want to be a part of that, but I said yes because I don't want anybody to be upset with me. That creates a sense of depression because, again, it feels like I have no power over me. I have no control over my life. Dr. William Glasser, who I will argue is one of the greatest psychiatrists of the 20th century, said that there's 5 things that you really need. The first is the most basic. You need food, clothing, shelter, that sort of thing. But the second thing is you need to love and be loved. Thirdly, you need to have some control over your life. Fourthly, you need to have some sense of power in your life. And fifthly, you need to have fun. So the point is, if a person continues to say yes and they can't say no, what they're saying is, I don't have any power or control over my life. And when they live out that life or lifestyle, depression becomes reality. Another one that I hear sometimes from pastors and from parents is this: I am responsible for other people's problems. In other words, had I done this, they wouldn't have done that. Had I said this, they would have had a better, chance. Therefore, I must be responsible because I didn't get involved, or I didn't, show up, or I didn't, spend time, or I didn't call them, when I needed to, or whatever it may be. And so taking on that level of responsibility can be very depressing. This is also true, like I said, especially of parents. And I'll argue parents of adult children.
Ooh.
When they say things like, well, my adult child, drinks too much. It must be my fault. My adult child can't keep a job, and it must be my fault. My adult child is not, paying their child support. It must be my fault. Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's not your fault. But if you believe that it is, and you take that responsibility, then there are behaviors which are egregious in these cases, are going to cause depression in you because you're taking on that responsibility.
Now, you made a distinction there, and you said especially adult children, and talking about adult children. So explain a little bit of the nuance for somebody that's saying, well, how much of a responsibility should I have for my 10-year-old versus my 25-year-old?
Right. So as a parent of a 10-year-old or even a 12-year-old, 15-year-old, you're still the architects of their life. You still are invested. You're still involved. You still have some control over their decisions as far as whether that you allow them to go somewhere or do something or be a part of something or sign up for something. But when they're an adult, you really have very little control, if any at all. And so therefore, the decisions now are on them. The decisions and choices they make are now their decisions and their choices. And once they hit 18, once they hit 21, it's now on them. And I say to parents all the time, you have to be careful and cautious as to how much responsibility you take for their decisions. And so, and even teenagers, I will argue that in some situations, some circumstances, they are responsible for the decisions they make. If they're, have a driver's license, they're driving a car. If they are being delinquent when it comes to, or irresponsible when it comes to work, or in some cases, even when it comes to their homework or their studies. You want them to get the good grade, but you know what? They're the ones who have to study for the exam.
And are ultimately responsible. And
exactly.
That's where I think some of that, the process of going from children having very little responsibility in their own life to growing to, when you're an adult and you're mature and you move out on your own and you're 18 years old, like you're responsible for your decisions, your actions. And there's a process of sort of handing off authority as they get older in some of those older teen years.
Exactly. And I hear parents say all the time, I'll raise them better than that. And you probably did. But the reality is their decision, their choice is now theirs. And they will make that decision, that choice, based on a number of reasons. And that's important for you to believe and to understand. It's their choice, it's their decision, and that's how they are going to have to take, responsibility for those actions.
I like that's really good. It sounds like when we're talking about depression and the source of depression, it can be
multiple sources,
some external circumstances, but it can also be, it sounds like a lot of internal perspectives maybe that we have about ourselves.
Exactly. And also too, which is the next thing we're going to get to, is that there are certain medical conditions that bring in depression. For example, hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid. Your thyroid is this endocrine gland that secretes hormones, one of those being thyroxine. And that influences the metabolic rate of our body. And so the point is that if your thyroid is not performing well, it can lead to, some depression. Not only that, diabetes can lead to depression, obesity, COPD, just to name a few. Here's some interesting stats based on the research that we're looking at. Women are more affected than men when it comes to depression. Women are more affected and more likely to have depression than men. Those over 60, more likely to suffer with depression than those, say, under. If you have a family history of depression, or if you have life events such as childhood trauma that have never been fully treated, that too can, again, be a source of depression.
So again, your area of expertise, I'm sure some people they heard what you just said, that there maybe are some areas of trauma that you experienced in life that have not been treated.
Right.
Help maybe us understand, and some of our listeners understand, when you say trauma that hasn't been treated,
Right.
what does that look like?
For example, if a child was severely abused, and they never dealt with it, they never talked it out, they never dealt with that trauma, they never faced, what happened in those situations. They never go back, if you will, in their mind as an adult and see themselves, and the trauma they experience. So if there's not some sort of therapeutic, intervention, and they've never dealt with it, then what begins to happen is when something is said or done, when a person yells at them, or when a boss, reprimands them, or when a boss threatens them with their job or whatever, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to get better, okay, I'm going to work this out, okay, I'm going to, improve my sales or whatever, they become depressed because that trauma trigger has just been hit of an event that happened 20 years, 30 years before.
And so what I'm hearing you say, because there are going to be people that maybe push back against this or have dismissed this, what I'm hearing you say is that even things that maybe are so far back that somebody might say, oh, that's so far back in my life, it doesn't affect me. I don't need to go back and relive that or unpack that.
Right.
What I'm hearing you say is that those things leave an impact on us, an impression that we have to deal with.
Right. Just because we get older doesn't mean that trauma goes away or those events. Now, you can mask it. You can, again, put it in a compartment, so to speak. And that compartment may be fine and safe for a long time until the wrong trigger is pulled.
Ooh.
And when the wrong trigger is pulled, that trauma comes out, with a vengeance, flooding the psyche. And again, it's very similar to, what we call PTSD. When a person who was in war comes back home and they've been doing fine for 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden a muffler backfires.
Right.
They're automatically back in that war zone.
Yeah.
In their emotions and in their mind, physically, all of the above, because again, that trauma has never been fully dealt with, fully worked out. And so that's important to understand. And so these trauma triggers from childhood can lead to depression whenever those triggers are pulled. So again, real quickly, the difference between depression and sadness. Diagnosed basically is this: depression that is diagnosed, or sadness that is diagnosed for more than 2 weeks, creates, if you will, a major depressive disorder. So again, just to kind of repeat one more time, depression and sadness, the difference being, to be diagnosed with depression, the symptoms must last more than 2 weeks.
Which is a great question then. What are some of the symptoms?
Yeah.
You said 5 of 9.
Right. So here are some of those symptoms of major depressive disorder. Number 1, a sense of sadness almost all day. All day, every day, a sense of sadness lasting more than 2 weeks. You're just sad. I'm just, a failure, etc.
Classic Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. For our Winnie the Pooh fans
That's
out
right.
there. Number 2, no interest in pleasurable activities. When you feel like, I used to love golf, but I don't golf anymore. I used to love tennis. I don't play tennis. I used to love, eating a good steak, but the steak doesn't interest me anymore, or whatever it may be. But when you have lost interest in the pleasurable activities you used to enjoy. Thirdly, significant weight gain or loss. When you're eating a lot and gaining weight, or you just can't eat anything and can't keep anything down. But when you're gaining weight significantly or losing weight significantly, in other words, when you're, if you go beyond a 5-pound difference in the course of, say, 2 to 4 weeks, that could be a symptom. Changes in sleep patterns. We have, again, just recognized, at least in a level of research, the power and the importance of getting a good night's sleep. A good night's sleep, 6 to 8 hours, a deep sleep that you wake up refreshed. When you do not have a good night's sleep for a long period of time and there's a change in your sleep patterns, that is a symptom of depression.
And all the parents with babies and little kids said amen to that.
Yes, right. And that's true. That's why so many parents with small children, struggle with this area.
Right at postpartum depression and anxiety.
They can't get any sleep,
yeah.
and they're anxious. Psychomotor agitation, which is a fancy way of saying, I just can't put one foot in front of the other, so to speak. I'm just shuffling along. Fatigue and loss of energy is a symptom of major depression. Feeling worthless, feeling guilt, again, are symptoms. Poor concentration, and the worst of all, thoughts of death and dying. I just don't want to live. I would be okay dying is the mindset of the person who has these symptoms. Now, if you have 5 out of those 9 for more than 2 weeks, in most cases, you could be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. There's another type of depression we need to touch on just for a moment, and that is symptoms of what's called persistent depressive disorder, which are symptoms that last more than 2 years. So if you have these symptoms that last more than 2 years, you can, again, be diagnosed with this. And here are the 7 of them. And you only need 2 or 6 of them, I should say. You only need 2 of the 6 for this diagnosis. Again, significant weight gain or loss, changes in sleep patterns, loss of energy, loss of self-esteem, a poor concentration, and feelings of hopelessness. Now, if you have those symptoms for more than 2 years, then you could be diagnosed with a persistent depressive disorder. Now, the question everybody wants to ask is, and there's other type of depressive disorders, by the way, but these are the main 2, major depression and persistent. The main question I think everybody wants to ask is, what do you do? What to do if I'm experiencing these things and I have been diagnosed with depression, maybe by my physician or a therapist or a pastor has said, hey, look, you might want to look into this. These things are concerning to me. What to do? Number 1, therapy. Therapy helps you to rethink cognitively what you can do differently. It helps you to rethink where you are in life, helps you to rethink what you could do to manage some of these symptoms. Number 2 is medication. Now, let me just say this real quickly about medication. Medication does not cure depression. It only treats the symptoms. But medication does not cure depression. It only treats the symptoms.
That's good.
And that's important to know. We said earlier, exercise is an important thing. Even if you just walk a little bit, ride your bike, do something active with your kids or grandkids. Kerry Jones, who was the 4th licensed psychologist in Louisiana, used to always say this one. He always said to fight off depression or to manage it, do something for others.
Yeah.
Do something for others. Bake some cookies, bring them to your neighbor, wash your neighbor's truck, invite them over, make them lunch, take them to get coffee. Number 5, don't be alone. When you're depressed, the worst thing that can happen is don't be alone. Invite people over, invite your kids over, spend time with your spouse. Try to narrow down what the cause may be. It may be medical. It may be something that's happening in your life or lifestyle. And last of all, never give up. Prayer, worship, and Bible study. Those things are powerful in our life. Those things speak into our life. Those things bring hope into our life, which is what we need when we're dealing with any type of depression.
I think there's some great words from the Family Answer Man. Kind of sum up my mantra in life that everybody needs coffee, therapy, and Jesus. And so we will wrap up our Family Answer Man episode with that. We want to say thank you again for joining us. Thank you again to the incredible people of Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. And as a reminder, this is not a therapy session. If you feel like your symptoms have moved from sadness into a state of depression, we want to encourage you, seek out professional help. Find a therapist that can help you navigate those things. We want you to know that we are praying for you, and we hope that today's episode has inspired you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family.